I just watched an anti-ICE protest down Main Street in Park City, Utah, with a 91-year-old man who was cellmates with Nelson Mandela on Robben Island Prison. How's that for a cold open, playlisters?
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy Hour.
Happy hour.
You fucked that up so bad.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristoff.
Anna Muskie Goldwyn.
I'm Anthony Barkat.
Okay, tell us the story.
We have a great show here. Obviously, another jam-packed episode. We're going to get into all the insanity surrounding ICE and the fallout from that. We're going to be talking about Andrew Garbarino, the politician on our playlist, and we're going to discuss how to talk about the Second Amendment. Fun stuff. We also finally have, may I say, a hot win of the week. I think,
girl.
Objectively, we got a hot win of the week.
Super hot.
But first, I got to tell you this story because this is one of the most surreal things that I just experienced. So I'm out here in Park City, Utah. The Sundance Film Festival is going on. A group of people at Haven Entertainment, who the three of us are working with on a project right now, has a documentary premiering out here called Troublemaker about Nelson Mandela. And featured in this documentary is a guy named Mac Maharaj. So Mac Maharaj was on Robben Island Prison. He was one of the youngest political activists sent there. He is a South African anti-apartheid activist, strategist, and political leader. And he was very close with Nelson Mandela. And when they all got out of prison, he became the transportation secretary and a number of other high-ranking positions within the government. Suffice it to say, this 91-year-old has seen some shit. So we are literally talking about Maxwell Frost. I'm walking with him out of an Uber. I'm taking him to like the Variety photo studio, and we're chatting about Maxwell Frost. He's the youngest member of Congress. Mac is like, oh, I was 1 year older than him when I first was sent to Robben Island Prison.
Wow.
And we're talking about the state of politics in the United States. And I asked him, I was like, what do you think we need to do here in this country? He's like, well, the first step to any resistance is to get organized. So he's like, you all better get organized. And literally, as we step out onto Main Street, 2,000 people are marching by with anti-ICE signs, with protest whistles and shouting. They're saying immigrants are welcome here, fuck ICE. And I turn to my right, and here is this 91-year-old anti-apartheid, like revolutionary, who's just watching this. And I'm like thinking to myself, is he at all fazed by this? What does he think of this whole thing going on in the United States? This is his first time in Sundance and in Utah. He's obviously been to the United States before, but it was just one of those moments where I was thinking to myself, holy shit, this guy has seen so much stuff that feels in line with some of the things we're seeing and how these events in history tend to repeat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me thinking, like, what, and as we have this conversation today, I want to ask you guys, like, what you think we should be learning from this and learning from history and learning from the responses that our leaders are giving or lack thereof, and how those are going to play in the future, in the history books, as we look back on this moment. So I thought that was a really wild story to kick us off into this episode.
It's interesting because like it's something that I, not just in this past week of news, but just like in general over the last couple of months, that I've been thinking so much about of, does this, like, we're relatively young, we haven't lived half our lives yet, right? Like we are relatively young in the grand scope of kind of people's history.
Well, you and I are, Anna. You and I are.
Okay. Yes. Sorry.
I'm living to like 100.
For those of us who will live to old age.
You get ready.
But I've just been thinking a lot about, like, is this as crazy as it feels. Like I've been asking my parents, and it kind of reminded me of it when you were saying like, what does he think of this, right? Like does this faze him? And it reminded me of a quote I read this morning from Bill Clinton. And look, I know that Bill Clinton's like not on our good list right now with the whole Epstein thing, but I thought this quote was sort of an answer to your question of like, does this faze this guy? And President Clinton, who is obviously, very old now and has had, one might say, one of the most, full lives of any living person, he said, over the course of a lifetime, we face only a few moments where decisions we make and the actions we take will shape our history for years to come. This is one of them.
Wow.
And I felt like it was almost like affirming to me, because I think that sometimes as a young person, you're like, oh my God, this all feels insane. And then you talk to your parents or your grandparents and you're like, oh, it's not that crazy. Like crazy shit has been happening forever in the course of human history. But reading that quote, it was like this affirmation of like, yeah, this is really insane, like a really intense what's happening right now. And I don't think that anyone should feel like it's remotely something that we can kind of just write off as like another wave of sort of like politics and government and history and whatever. Like it is something very significant. And so I'm sure that Mac, as you said his name is,
Yep.
that
Mac Maharaj.
that despite all that he has seen and done, he feels that and can attest to that.
Well, even a little bit to that point as well is when these situations happen, one thing I really hate is when people come and ask for forgiveness after as a Catholic, I know that you're supposed to accept this, but I mean, today we just saw Kanye West put out a full page in the Wall Street Journal.
Don't even get me started.
No, but I'm putting Kanye West up there with Secretary Noem and all these other people where you're like, I don't want you to come years later and go, what I did was wrong, because that is wrong. What you're doing is taking advantage of this situation and asking for forgiveness later. This is one of those situations that should not allow it.
Completely agree with you when it comes to like public figures and leaders. The one caveat that I would disagree with that on is like everyday people, because I do think that there has to be an understanding and a forgiveness and a lack of judgment when it comes to people who are changing their minds, or people who have maybe always just affiliated with one party or another and now are saying, well, I still affiliate with that party, but not with this, right? I think that like we do have to reserve judgment for everyday people who don't have all the information or didn't have all the information at some point, and we're listening to these people. But I think
these people aren't the decision makers.
100%, but they're the ones that put the decision makers in those positions.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I think it's very different.
Yeah,
it's more these specific people.
Totally.
It's once again, and to me, I think it's also a lot of these other politicians as well.
Yeah,
it's like you're sitting here, and are you going to sit back and not say anything, or are you? And
well, I want to get to that, and I want to pick up this conversation and just sort of take a step back for a second, set the stage. At this point in the news, everybody has seen that over the weekend, a 37-year-old named Alex Preddy was shot and killed by ICE officers and Border Patrol agents in Minneapolis. He was carrying a cell phone. He was armed, although the gun was holstered. And it appears from the video evidence that we've seen that ICE agents could be seen removing the firearm from his holster prior to them then firing 10 shots, which killed him. So we're going to kind of get to the political fallout of this, what people are saying. But Anthony, kind of walk us through this and help us understand what now this has kind of sparked and started across Minneapolis and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to kind of elaborate a bit more on that background, I just want to say, like, Alex Preddy, He's a U.S. citizen. He was an ICU nurse. He had no significant criminal history. If you watch any of the videos from every angle, you're hoping to find something where you go, like, okay, what may be triggered for this guy to get shot 10 times? And even if you go back 30 seconds in this video, it shows him actually helping the situation and trying to diffuse it, not doing anything. I do want to mention the Trump administration described him as a domestic terrorist who was intended to harm others. And I think that's very important to point out, especially after watching the video where you go, okay, this guy is not a domestic terrorist. He was an
Right.
ICU nurse. He was a Minnesota resident. He was a lawful gun owner with a permit. He was there filming, and not in a threatening way. And if anything, he helped a woman who was pushed down by an ICE agent who was like thrown. The push was so aggressive, but it shows what an amazing human being this person was. But this has now sparked hundreds of protests. I mean, thousands of people walking the streets in Minneapolis. There's been a huge public outcry, and it's tons of public pressure as well. Like the AFL-CIO has even talked about how they think the immigration agent should be leaving Minnesota right now. Many major Minnesota businesses and even sports franchises have signed letters calling for immediate de-escalation. And even the NBA postponed a game.
Their game.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So, there's a few things I want to just get to here. So, Governor Tim Walz, he's calling the situation federal occupation. Local leaders are saying they've been given limited access to information by the federal authorities as well. And they've called for state level investigations. Meanwhile, you have the Trump administration and DHS defending the agent's actions as self-defense, and that the political, local, and state leaders have been getting in the way of ICE from doing their job here. I will say this has even triggered our, wonderful head of the Justice Department to send a letter to the governor to support these federal law enforcement actions. The letter also asked for Minnesota's welfare and public assistance data to look into, to investigate fraud. It's asking them to repeal the sanctuary policies and then provide access to unredacted state voter registration rolls.
Well, this could also,
want that
just
to
to jump
sink
in
in.
really quick, that was Pam Bondi saying that we'll leave the state if you give us all of this. It's a bribe. It's like fully a bribe for people's information.
And I want that to sink in. This is people's information here. That
Right.
is
Personal
very
freedoms.
scary. Personal
Yeah, and
freedom.
when
Right.
they
Personal
say-
privacy.
And when they say they want the information about welfare and social programs, they can mask it in this whole fraud thing that was going on before these protests took place. But what we know that really is about is making sure that anyone who they deem unworthy of those can be kicked off of those programs.
I mean, that has nothing to do with immigration
Nothing.
enforcement.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well,
I
want
will
to,
say Pam Bondi she's tied for first with Secretary Noem and Caroline Leavitt for evil villain for Women of the Year. So
I'll tell you, it's a long
Cruella
growing
de Vil.
list. I mean, yeah,
those three
these,
are the top. It's hard to pick.
Yeah.
The
Well,
other-
I wanted to point out, I think, we're going to talk about some of the political stuff here and what people are saying, what I think even louder, what people aren't saying. But I want to read you what President Obama said, because he weighed in here. And Anna, as you referenced what former President Bill Clinton said, I think there's a question I want to ask you guys here, which is, so Obama over the weekend said, the killing of Alex Preddy is heartbreaking tragedy. It should also be a wake-up call to every American, regardless of party, that many of our core values as a nation are increasingly under assault. He then, of course, went on to say law enforcement have a difficult job, called for nonviolence and de-escalation. And, there's always been a pattern or a norm, as it were, of past presidents not weighing in to issues, domestic policy, foreign policy, etc., once they've left office. Obviously, this is remarkable. This is a sort of brief but pointed statement from Obama here. Obviously, similar razor sharpness from Clinton. I'm curious, I think, yes, there's maybe some issues with Clinton weighing in right now, given the potential controversy with Epstein. But are we seeing a Barack Obama and perhaps George W. Bush moment here where the two of them being out of office long enough that they need to really weigh in a big way to what's going on right now? You're shaking your head and you're on mute.
I was just
Yeah.
really trying to like ramp up. Well, because the reason I muted myself for a second is I wanted to go search if George W. Bush had put out a statement, and he has not.
Okay.
But my answer to your question is I don't care about them anymore. I'm like, the world has moved on. They have
Yeah.
not been president for long enough that the world has dramatically changed, even though we still deal with some of the same issues. And I personally feel that as like a young person in America, they are not the leaders that I look to as like a North Star of how to feel about things. I personally feel it's much more important to have the leaders of our current world, whether they be business leaders, whether they be religious leaders, whether they be political leaders, are stepping in and saying something. And I know we're not going to maybe hear anything surprising from a lot of politicians, but I do think that there's opportunity for other people to be speaking up. But personally, like I understand the idea of like Obama and Bush and to an extent Clinton have a very important perspective and a position as the like living presidents to weigh in on something this important. But I think like for myself, that doesn't move me because I don't think that they're going to solve anything, I guess is my
Well,
point.
that's fair. And I think you're absolutely right that like we want the leaders of today who are, obviously the next generation of leaders and the rising names in Congress and elsewhere. But I'm curious, don't you think that maybe if people like Bush and Obama made forceful statements and beyond statements, really got out there, that would create almost a permission structure for some of these other people to start speaking out?
Really
I-
don't. I mean, it's cynical of me, but I really don't.
I agree with Anna on this. I mean, I think it helps. It definitely helps, but it's more of everyday people like speaking out. It's those type of leaders. Like you're starting to see, more people from, some celebrities, which are always kind of there, but even like a lot of people who are, massive sports athletes who are speaking out right now. Like those are the people who need to come out and say, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
one of the things some of my Republican friends have been like, well, like Democrats weren't protesting over Laken Riley, who was a nurse who was murdered by an immigrant here illegally, and the immigrant was here illegally. But okay, there's a massive difference here.
Right. That was a
right?
bad
Like,
person doing a bad thing that had
Yes.
nothing
Right,
to
that
do
was a
with
crime.
like
that
that was just a crime.
That was a crime.
Yeah.
This is a
That was a
federal
crime.
agent shooting a innocent bystander, and then our administration calling him an assassin who was there to murder federal agents, who was going to massacre government agents and inflict maximum damage. Like,
Yeah.
and then we have our FBI director claiming he doesn't have a right to bring a firearm to a protest, which is
Well,
precisely the
Well, let's
opposite
save
of
that.
the
Let's
actual
save that
law.
for a second.
Yeah, let's save that because we're gonna talk about that later. But I think something interesting, that I don't know if you guys have seen this news, but the front runner GOP candidate running for the Minnesota
Wild.
governor literally had a real, profile and courage moment and
Mhm.
has dropped out of the race and has left the Republican Party, citing this incident and the immigration disaster that he feels is happening in his state. And, this is, I think, those types of people seem to be, Anna, what and Anthony, what you guys are saying. These are the people who need to
Yeah.
step up and take a stand.
Yeah.
And you
And
know who he
I think
mentioned in that
Who?
was his daughters.
Yeah.
He
Wow.
said, I don't know like what I can be showing my daughters during this moment.
Well, he
And
said
frankly,
I have to look my daughters in the face and tell them I
Yeah.
did the right thing, and I know that I'm doing that.
yeah. I
Wow.
thought it was extreme. I mean, I don't think a lot of people like their kids, and I think most people are terrible parents, to be honest. So,
Spoken like a true.
Single man in his 30s.
Yeah.
I mean, I think good parenting is
It's rare. It's hard to come
and
by. I think you're right.
And it's the issue in our world is people
Yeah.
didn't have
Yeah.
good parents. and
Yeah, I
parents
mean,
who
look,
cared about their
let's
kids.
just like do a little satire for a second. Like, could you imagine if like Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino, right? That's his
Yep.
name, the fucking Nazi. And
Yep.
and I'm allowed to call him that because he's dressing like one. I'm not
Yes,
in this
no,
camp
totally.
that's like all Trumpers are Nazis, but this guy is literally dressing like an
No, this
SS
guy's
officer
very much a
walking
Nazi.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
and when you use Nazi slogans on the front of your podium at press conferences and
Yeah.
talk about returning America to its heritage,
Yeah, you deserve the
it's
title.
Nazi.
But,
Yeah.
if they had just been like a little bit more loved, hugged, reminded of like, that it's okay to be who you are and blah, blah, blah by their parents, I think we would not be in the situation that we're in right now.
There was
By
a
the way,
wild video about,
Holocaust-
well, I was going to say about Bovino, where his grandfather came over from Italy. His father was first generation, and then it sounded like his father went to like prison and left like the mom. And so,
Well, there you go.
it seems like he's really got some like
It's got daddy issues. Just like
undealt
Trump.
with trauma here. Yeah.
Yes, they both have daddy
That
issues.
is playing out sadly on the streets of our cities.
By the way, the Holocaust Museum came out kind of denouncing what Walt said of comparing like this to Anne Frank and whatnot,
Mm.
which I thought was interesting to see come
You know,
out.
they have a responsibility.
Yeah, they're
respect
like,
that.
whoa, that's our thing. That's our
Well,
thing.
It's a little
Yeah.
bit, you got to kind of like
Even though
step
her-
back sometimes.
Even though her quotes are perfect for the
Totally.
moment.
Right.
The one thing I wanted to say, this will kind of like lead into our discussion of our politician of the week, is something that I have found really interesting. Anthony, when you were talking about this label of domestic terrorist, that came from Noam and Stephen Miller. And it actually did not come directly from Trump in this instance. It came directly from Trump about Renee Good. But what is so interesting is I was watching part of a press conference today with Caroline Leavitt, one of the, evil witches of the Trump administration. And she was asked, does the White House agree with the statements that this man was a domestic terrorist, was an assassin there to like murder, to hurt people? And she did a little word salad and was like, that we believe that like no one deserved to get hurt, like whatever. And it was so clear to me that, and now they're sending in Tom Homan, who's like a little bit more of like a measured, I mean, he's also insane, but like a measured person compared to Noam and Bovino. And so it's really interesting. I think that we're starting to see the White House, because all Trump cares about is public perception of him. So the White House starting to realize like, these labels are actually triggering people that we don't want to be triggered. And maybe this is going to start to hurt us in elections. And they're not necessarily walking them back or like negating them, but the inability to sort of like fully support them in a crazy truth social post is melting away a little bit. And I think that's
Guys,
very significant.
yes. And let me just Caroline Leavitt this for a moment.
My God.
Here with my
Of your
my
cross
cross
of
and
pens.
just say that I think it's very telling, Anna. You're exactly right that this Trump is just like a smart guy when it comes to PR. Like he knows this looks fucking terrible. And while he doesn't give a shit about these people, he cares about how it makes him look. And I think, there was a reporting today that Ted Cruz has been talking with Trump and was like, Mr. President, you need to fix this because you're going to get creamed in the midterms. And Trump told him, apparently the quote is, he said, "Fuck off, Ted." Yeah. It's just like,
Honestly,
okay.
kind of amazing. But by the way,
Yeah.
for those listeners who aren't seeing the video, Michael has this little cross on his chest right now, and it's nestled,
a rather
right?
large. It's a rather
nestled,
large cross.
It's nestled right in between his chest muscles, so it looks good.
I can see his cleavage.
I see why everyone does it now. I see why everyone does it.
Can I say one thing on a more serious note, and then I'll move on to the next section? It's something that I was thinking about today, which is that there's this like horrific irony to me about the fact that Alex Preddy, who was a nurse, no less an ICU nurse in the VA, treating the most in need of one of the most vulnerable populations in our country, that he is the person who has died and is maybe the symbol of the moment that is shifting things in this awful policy that has been going forward. And I've just been thinking about that because I feel like we don't live in a country that should have martyrs. I think it's something you hear around the world when specifically talking about like, you know, terrorist groups and things like that. Like the United States doesn't need martyrs, you know, like we fought a revolution. Those people were martyrs. We fought a civil war. Those people were martyrs. Like we don't need that anymore. But I couldn't help but think of like, this is a guy who was an unwilling potential martyr if things continue on the path towards resolving some of the violence we're seeing from the federal government. And the fact that this man dedicated his life voluntarily to helping people in need and now may be the turning point for whatever happens next, is this just like horrific, bittersweet, like really melancholy irony that I've been thinking about. So I just wanted to share that.
Well, tell us about the politician on our playlist, because he's somebody we've covered for a while, and I think is in a very interesting position, and we haven't talked about him.
Yeah. So Andrew Garbarino is a representative from New York. He represents the 2nd District. He's 41 years old. His district covers the southern portion of Long Island. He's been in office.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing? He was elected in 2020, been in office since 2021. Good. And he is notably the House Homeland Security Chairman. And he is now coming out, he's a Republican, coming out and seeking testimony from leaders at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, CPB, CBP, and U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services. So before I get into that, I want to just take a step back and talk about him and his district, because I think it's very interesting to lead to why he is in this position right now. So the district is really interesting. It's divided almost equally between registered Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliated, with about 30% of voters in each category. With that said, the district has been more reliably red since 2020, which is when Garbarino was elected, and he got 65% of the vote. Here's some interesting things about Representative Andrew Garbarino. He did not object to the 2020 presidential results. In 2021, he was one of 8 Republicans to vote for a background check gun control bill. He was one of 35 Republicans to vote to establish the January 6th Commission. He voted for the Infrastructure Act, which was Biden's big signature legislation. And most recently, he notably fell asleep and missed the vote for Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill vote. So he never actually went on record of whether he would have voted for that or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he's really walking a tightrope.
He's walking a tightrope, but he's managed to win a couple elections now. People in his district obviously respect him. And that has shown in the way that he's elevated himself in Congress to now become chair of the House Committee on Homeland Security, which is tasked with providing oversight on the DHS, amongst other things. And I just wanted to read his statement, and then we can kind of talk about it. He said, "As chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security, my top priority remains keeping Americans safe. and ensuring the Department of Homeland Security can accomplish its core mission. I take my oversight duties for the department seriously, and Congress has an important responsibility to ensure the safety of law enforcement and the people they serve and protect. I am committed to ensuring ICE, CBP, and USCIS are effectively using the historic resources provided through reconciliation to strengthen public safety, and I look forward to each of these agencies testifying before the committee. By the way, that historic resources that he's referencing is the $75 billion that was put into that one big beautiful bill for DHS. So do we think that Garbarino is potentially helping the levees break against the Trump administration when it comes to this enforcement?
I mean, once again, like, this is where leaders need to stand up. Like, I'm still confused by the people who say there shouldn't be an investigation. I mean, what is the harm in having that done? That is what the U.S. is built on. And that is why people feel safe
who are
and free.
saying that, the people who are saying that are the ones who know that if you actually do a proper investigation, you're going to see that these ICE agents are at absolute 100% fault. The government is at fault, and that would totally puncture the balloon of this entire, false policy premise that they've staked their entire party and political future on. So the ones who are calling for an actual investigation are the only ones admitting that, yeah, there's wrongdoing here, and an investigation will show that.
And to that point, a lot of the Republicans who have come out calling for an investigation and talking about, their sort of distaste for what happened are people who have already made a habit of speaking up against Trump. So people like Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, people like Tom Tillis from North Carolina, who's retiring, people like Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, who Trump already doesn't like for a lot of reasons. So
Thomas Massey,
who we know Trump hates. Although I did see, like Mike Lawler, who we obviously talk about a lot and have had on here, he did say that he supports an investigation, which is not surprising given sort of his general politics. So, I think that there are some people like Garbarino who, because of the demographics of their district, can afford to maybe not come out in a sort of negative way against it, but talk about the need for an investigation. And then I think there are some people who understand they're free to speak against Trump, like Massey or Bill Cassidy and Tom Tillis, and basically say, like, this was wrong. And, they can be a little more strong with their language. But I still think, like, the cap is still on the bottle. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
This isn't sort of like a watershed moment, but I think that if these hearings will happen, and most likely I think they will be televised and publicized, and what I think is going to be really interesting is how the right-wing media responds to it. Like, we've seen a lot of conversation on Fox News about how this is being mishandled. A lot of anchors on Fox News calling for an investigation. I saw something of Brian Kilmeade, right? Who does the Fox and Friends. I think that's who I was looking at, that he was saying he was in support of Tom Homan getting there because he's like, we need someone who's not as divisive as Noam, and he needs to go in there and be the voice of reason. And so, as we know, a lot of public opinion is controlled by the media, as much as we want to respect what these politicians are doing. So I do think that if these hearings happen and it begins to be covered by more mainstream right-wing media, I'm not talking about crazy people here, that could begin to change the way that things happen in my point of view.
Yeah, no, I think I think it will. And there's so many points during Trump's term where you're like, man, you could really be such an amazing leader right here and go, hey, we're going to have an investigation. By the way, this is going to continue to happen. The ICE raids are going to continue to happen. What happened in Minnesota, something went wrong, but by the way, this isn't stopping everything I'm doing.
You're sounding like a semi-reasonable person, though. We know that that's just
I mean, people would be like, yeah, thank you for admitting. And by the way, it's not on you. You put leaders in charge to do things. It's on this
is the perfect. If I was in Trump's inner circle and I was advising him right now, I'd say, dude, this is the easiest thing to solve for you politically. Fire Kristi Noem tomorrow. Blame it on her.
Free Botox for life.
Hang it all around her neck, and then put in somebody who resets. It's you're absolutely right. There's like zero de-escalation. There's zero, lowering of the temperature, and there's zero apology. And unfortunately, that is who Trump has proven to be. That he's if he were to fire Kristi Noem over this, that would be admitting wrongdoing.
Never gonna happen.
Which we know he's never going to do. And he's not capable of that. And so my fear is that this is going to escalate to a point where somebody takes a gun to somebody like Greg Bavino, or even just an ICE agent. And that results in this whole martyrdom, right? Where the martyrdom is not for these victims of ICE who are just dying innocently at the hands of ICE, unjustified, but rather an ICE agent who's going to be this law enforcement type Charlie Kirk, but for the Republicans to just now run with.
You know what the thing that gives me hope though about that is that I feel like what we have seen from the people of Minneapolis so different than any other city. I was saying to someone yesterday, I feel like it's the only city where this could really be unfolding in the way that it is. Like, it's the right size, it's the right demographics. The fact that it's so fucking cold is like this added level of drama to it all. And I feel like if it was LA, if it was Chicago, if it was Portland, there are other places where I feel like there's more edge, and I would be more in fear of what you're talking about. And look, not to say that what your fear is would only happen in Minneapolis. It could obviously happen anywhere. But like, I just feel like there has been this really interesting resiliency and community feeling that at least us on the outside have seen from the people of Minneapolis that makes me feel like that type of retaliatory violence, at least within that city, is a much lower possibility than other places in the country. So that might be naive to say, but speaking of guns and shooting people.
Yes, let's discuss how to talk about the Second Amendment.
What is segue? What is segue?
Yeah. Wow. So the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, ratified in 1791, reads as follows: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. 27 words, folks. That's it.
That's what all the drama is about.
You should have had it powdered. You should have had a powdered wig on for that one.
Yes. Hear ye, hear ye. So I think what is really remarkable right now, we've been seeing a lot of statements from people over this. We've now, I think, gone into slightly uncharted territory. So we're seeing Kristi Noem, speaking of powder, she has now been publicly defending these ICE agents and these killings. And now the new party line seems to be that he showed up to a protest with a weapon. And now we're seeing a lot of Republicans and people like Kash Patel and other officials start to try and get all the mileage they can out of this. Well, you can't bring a weapon to a protest. That is asking for trouble. And I think that this, of course, is hilarious in the face of January 6th and all of the violent armed insurrectionists at that event. This is hilarious with regard to Kyle Rittenhouse, the young man who shot and killed two protesters with an AR-15 assault rifle, was acquitted and then became a hero among the right-wing media and politicians alike. And of course, this disregards the husband and wife, Patricia and Mark McCloskey, who stood on the lawn of their place with AR-15s and handguns during peaceful protests, and then were asked to speak at the 2020 Republican National Convention.
Can't make this shit up.
The list goes on, but I think it is really, really rich that now we're hearing GOP folks say, well, we draw the line at you can't bring a gun to a protest. This, of course, has started to fracture the NRA agenda, who has come out defending the right to seemingly bring guns to protests. Guys, what do you make of this little GOP schism around the Second Amendment?
I want to take a step back because I will say that, like, I was talking to Billy about this the day that it happened. And the first thing that Billy said is he was like, why did he have a gun? And I was like, yeah, like, let's think
Good
about
question.
that for a
Yeah.
second, right?
Yeah.
Like, so my, bleeding liberal response was, well, look at all the agents who have guns. And this is obviously someone that we now know had a protector mindset. He was a nurse, for people in need.
By the way, it
And
was a right to carry state.
yeah. I mean, like, the legal side of it
Yeah.
aside, I'm just thinking sort of more philosophically, like, if I'm putting myself in his shoes, maybe it's like, I want to be there as a responsible protector for people who maybe can't protect themselves against these federal law enforcement agents that I see are being dangerous. At the same time, there's something that, like, is so scary to me about people feeling that they need to, people, let's just say in this instance, who are well-intentioned and nonviolent individuals in general, because I do not think we can talk in that way about some of the Jan 6 protesters or Kyle Rittenhouse, whatever, that to cross the line of, okay, I have a gun for whatever reason that he had a gun, I have it legally, whatever, to then feel I'm going to bring this into the into this sort of whatever he was doing, like observation, right? Knowing that this could complicate things, right? Like, just having weapons, I think, as someone who obviously was on the left side of politics, as this man, I assume, was, if he was out there doing that, knows the consequences that can come with that. Not that I'm saying that it would be him being shot, but it's something that we were talking about, because it is a really just crazy thing of, like, that this guy felt the need to bring a gun because obviously felt that the situation warranted it, because it had gotten so bad, and that maybe he felt that he was in a position to help people in that way that a lot of people maybe on the left would not feel, because maybe they don't want guns around or whatever. And so that was before sort of talking about, like, the GOP of it all, it was just something that I was kind of mulling over, because it's like,
Well,
I wish he didn't have the gun, like, I just wish he didn't have the gun.
sadly, it was wrong place, wrong time. And I've talked to some friends in Minnesota who sit on both sides. Like, having a gun there is very normal.
Yeah.
It's completely normal. And what I'd like to know with him is, was he traveling with a gun every day, like going to work, And because a lot of people I know who have concealed weapon permits, like, they have them on them at all times, just in case, right? Something happens, and who knows what that just in case is. And in this situation, like, I think this is probably someone who had their gun on them, more than, the average person does.
Right.
Yeah.
And
or like the average person in that demographic and community.
Average person in that demographic, right? And, like, we know there's bad crime in Minnesota, right? So maybe he has it because he's working in an area that's, like, a scary area to be in, right?
One
maybe
would assume it's with the best of intentions, I guess, in this.
And just like with some of these agents who it's like, oh, they went through a difficult time where they got hit by a car, like what happened with Renee Good. You're like, well, maybe one of his friends got killed by being carjacked with a gun, and maybe a gun would have saved him.
It's interesting being in Park City right now with a bunch of South Africans who are watching our news unfold in real time alongside us, and sitting.
They think they're back in South Africa.
Well, they're like, it's funny. They're like, they're like, mate, everything that's wrong is the gun laws. He's like, all your gun laws are the problem. And it's so obvious to them. We're also here with some Brits as well, and they say the same thing. They're like, your gun laws are
Very
insane.
strict gun laws in Britain.
Yeah.
That's
The
I'm
police
curious,
police
like,
don't even carry guns.
you know, the quote you read from President Clinton, I think is really sticking with me, and it's resonating with me but from the standpoint of, like, I think back to history classes or books I read on different events, and it always seems to be this, like, for lack of a better word, this dumb, stupid, avoidable incident that happens that then triggers this whole big colossal thing. It's like so and so got shot in the Boston port, and then we went to war with England. Like, whatever it
That's
is.
totally how it happened, by the way.
Yeah, and so, like, I'm like, we're looking at this and we're like, wow, this nurse got shot 10 times. This woman got shot in the face driving her car. Like, are these the moments, do you think? And obviously, like, we can't predict the future, but are these are these the inflection points that are going to somehow shake enough change and rattle enough people where they're going to say enough is enough? That's going to then make a difference.
I think it might in terms of like voter activity. I don't know. I actually don't think it's going to change much within the administration.
Do
Unfortunately,
you think anyone gets fired over this?
No. But I do think that there are people out there who either have sat out voting, who have voted for Trump for other reasons, who maybe will feel that they can't vote for people in the midterms who might support what he's doing. So I think that might change, but I don't think that this is an inflection point of like the government, the administration itself will change at all, because I don't think there's enough shame in the administration to respond in that kind of a way.
I am shocked at how pessimistic, and I've never heard you less optimistic about something, Anna. So this is a wild experience.
Just speaking my mind.
Yeah, I am going to take a different point of view on it. I think that this actually just solidified the midterms for the Democrats.
Wow.
I think they have work to do as far as galvanizing behind a cohesive message and actually getting, not dropping the ball, Charlie Brown style, like they are very good at doing in the past. But I think that the normal Republicans that I've talked to, and we'll take aside the crazy ones who write those comments on our Instagram, like, great, one less Democrat who's going to steal an election for us, right? Those sorts of insane rhetoric, which I don't actually think are all that many people at the end of the day. I think that the Republicans who I've talked to are all like, this is horrific. This is outrageous. This has to stop. And I think that there are enough of those voices in the districts of, and I hate to like ever feel like we as a country need to count on someone like Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski. But I do think that those areas and those types of people are really feeling the pressure. And I think that this has started a movement right now among people who are now saying enough is enough. I think we've lit that fuse. And I think that obviously, sadly, tragically, there's going to be a lot more shit that happens. But I do think that the fuse has been lit for the people to stand up and say, yes, we want sensible immigration reform. Yes, we want to get rid of the criminals. This is fucking outrageous, and this has to stop.
Can I ask a really cynical question?
Yes.
Do you think people would feel this way if both of the victims hadn't been white?
I don't. No, I don't. I think that is a sad state of the world right now. And I don't know if that's something that's going to change, but like we just watched the youngest member of Congress over the weekend get punched in the face and yelled racist remarks at. And I happened to be speaking with him. I saw him here 3 hours before that happened. And, I was fully expecting to see him out later that evening. And, when I see that, I'm seeing the headlines that's making. And obviously that this is somewhat different, but like, I think that is such a great example that there is a group of really racist people who have been empowered in this administration right now. And I think that the average person doesn't think that racism really is that big of a problem. And, or I should say, the average white person perhaps doesn't think that. And I think when that same person who is not ignorant or indifferent, but just maybe a little bit unaware, when they see two young white people be shot by immigration agents in the city streets unarmed, I think that is like a whoa, that could be me. And I think the immigrant communities have, are saying, yeah, we told you so. Like, remember when we
Yeah, they're
said,
also not the
hey,
first people to
this
get
could
shot
be
by.
you.
They're
Right,
not the first people to
exactly.
get shot and killed by ICE. There have been Latino people that has happened to before this. They just hasn't been captured on
Right,
camera, and some of them were not U.S. citizens, so we didn't care about it.
right, right. So yeah, I think the sad reality is that, the thing that has lit the proverbial fuse that I was referring to, I think very much is a fact that these two people were young white American citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, should we talk about some good news in a week of somberness?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm gonna get through this quickly.
Okay.
Our win of the week.
Yeah, because I got an open bar to get to. So time's a ticking, Anna.
Now, okay, you may or may not have seen Paris Hilton strutting her stuff in the halls of Congress last week. This was to advocate for the passage of the Defiance Act, which is also known as the Disrupt Explicit Forced Images of Non-Consensual Edits Act. Quite a mouthful. Which is a bipartisan bill to combat the spread of non-consensual deep fake pornography. So basically, regarding people who make AI porn of individuals and then sharing it on the internet. And this has been happening a lot. So what the bill does is it creates a civil right of action for victims of this to sue those who create, share, or distribute the material. So now they can go to court and seek damages from whoever creates or shares this stuff online. The Senate has actually already passed its version of this bill unanimously, and the House now, with this visit from Paris Hilton, has passed their version of the bill, which was co-sponsored by AOC and a Republican representative. So this is a big bipartisan effort. They'll need the Senate to now basically sign off on it and then eventually go to Trump's signature. But we can expect the Defiance Act to become law very soon. So I just personally wanted to say thank you, Paris Hilton, for not only using your voice to protect people's privacy online, but also, and I actually think this is almost like more important in the grand scheme of things, that it is bringing politicians together around AI legislation. I've said this before and I will keep saying it. Because of all the crazy shit that's happening in our government, there's not enough happening about what we are going to do as a country about AI and how they are going to help people as this is going on. And so I hope that this isn't the last bipartisan bill that we see regarding the impacts of AI, because the choice is not no regulation or regulation. As we see in this bill, there are so many nuances to this technology, but the technology is coming like a freight train. And I think this is like the first signal to say shit's going to get crazy and we have to come together and start to address all the different elements of how this can affect people, both good and bad.
Also, can I say, what a fucking boss. Like,
totally.
She's been on Capitol Hill
Thank you, Paris Hilton.
multiple
That's
times. And done bipartisan stuff, like what she was doing for kids as well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm honestly, that's hot. You're an icon. Go for it. Go off, queen.
It's hot, guys.
Well, on that note, playlisters, thank you, Paris Hilton.
Oh, wait. I just got a news alert. Can I just read it?
Yeah,
Kristi
what?
Noem has agreed to testify before Congress in March.
It's not going to say anything.
Oh my God.
I don't know.
Wow.
Anyway,
Yeah, that'll
all
be a
right.
word salad.
You know what?
Yeah.
That's actually not.
Ugh.
Or
Not
too
hot.
much both times.